All mind distortion comes from the inability to accept reality. Mind distortion is fantasy. Fantasies such as religion and supernatural and aliens and conspiracy theory, all of these things are believed 100% without any evidence, and this is fantasy. And this fantasy is driven by the inability to accept reality. Believing in an afterlife is because of the inability to accept death. Believing in magic is because of the inability to accept that we cannot control our environment. Believing in aliens is the inability to accept that we are alone in the universe. Believing in conspiracy theory is the inability to accept that there is some higher power other than us that has control over us. And we like to sort of think that we can somehow topple them by exposing this conspiracy. And it is a conspiracy. That's true. The people who rule over us have conspired to do so. That's a fact. It's not a theory. But what is the fantasy is that there's somehow aliens or devils involved and all of this kind of stuff. It's not. They're just people. People who print money and give that money to soldiers and police. Those police rule over us. So, I'm not here to change the world. I'm here to change your mind. This distorted thinking leads to suffering. This is the illusion they talk about in Buddhism, and it's always been a fact that our inability to accept reality then gets us to create fantasy. And that's not a bad thing, because out of this fantasy, we create solutions to the problems of reality. Right? We create technology out of fantasy. This phone I'm talking on, at one point was a fantasy, right? Just somebody's imagination. Oh, one day we can talk to each other miles away from each other, and I'll be able to see your face and hear your voice, but you won't be in the same room. This at one point was a fantasy. So fantasy is not a bad thing. It can lead to invention and creation. So that's good. But when you become obsessed with a fantasy and you don't take any positive creative action, then it becomes an illness that makes you suffer. So going around and telling everybody they're going to hell and that some magical god is going to come along one day and put them in hell for being bad is not productive. It's not helpful. It's not helping anybody. It's just making people angry and causing conflict. So this kind of fantasy and distortion of thinking is a problem for yourself and for others. You can, of course, say, well, I don't like that people's behavior is bad, and maybe I can write a book or do something to make suggestions of how people can behave better, and that might be a little more acceptable and realistic. Instead of telling them that some fantastic, beardy, weirdy alien sky god is going to punish them forever. It may be true, it may not be true, but in the present reality, there's no evidence for that, and it doesn't help anybody. So, we need to focus on reality. And every time you have a fantasy, you have to tell yourself, well, this is just compensating for some aspect of my psychology that will not accept the reality of life. And life is not easy. That's true. We die and we feel pain, and the people we love disappear out of our lives, and we face challenges, and we've got people ruling over us, and we get old, and there's endless realities that we create fantasies so that we don't deal with it. And this is no good, because we need to deal with it. We need to create solutions to these problems. And when we do, we will create heaven on earth, a physical reality, a real place that exists On this planet, right now, we create heaven on earth. But we can't get lost in the distortion of fantasy. We have to apply our ideas and our creativity and our invention to solving whatever problem that we have for ourselves. And when we solve that problem for ourselves, we then have the tools to share with others so they can easily solve those problems. And that's the reality. Each of us has an important role to play in the collective humanity that is manifesting heaven on earth. And that's what we've always been doing, and that's what we will do. And now that our conscious minds are focused on that, we can do it a lot better, because we create heaven on earth. We create heaven on earth. We create heaven on earth.